A long-awaited federal study finds that an estimated 32 million adults in the USA, about 1 in 7, are saddled with such low literacy skills that it would be tough for them to read anything more challenging than a children's picture book. This is a story about the 32 million adults in America who cannot read and can only see the American dream from the outside looking in. I began a journey to help one of them. Little did I know it would take 8 years and a host of literacy champions to make it happen. It is understandable to hear a child stumble when he is first learning to read. What is harder to watch is a struggling adult.
This is a true story about a very brave dog.
This is a town story.
His name was Balto.
About a very something dog.
The year was 1925. Balto lived in Nome, Alaska.
This name was Bowling, something.
Nome was a frontier town most of the year.
The years was 1925.
It was buried under ice and snow.
Bowling lived in something. I don't know. That's it. I can't do it.
I like school very much.
You do?
I like learning a lot. I like learning science, math, and multiplication. I ask my neighbors of a table if they could help me. If they don't, then I raise my hand. Mm-hmm. The hardest thing is to write really fast because my teacher writes fast and she tells us to write fast.
Gordon, how old are you?
56.
What was school like for you?
Terrible.
How was it terrible? What was elementary school like for you?
They never taught me. They never had time for me in elementary. Started when I was in the first grade, but I was in a Catholic school with all nuns that taught you, and they never had time for you either. So it's like I just sat in the back of the room and messed up. I felt like it didn't bother me because I got used to it. But if anybody would say something about it to me, then I'd sort of like get mad or knock their head off.
Mm-hmm. So you'd get into fights?
Yeah, I was always into fights about it because kids teased me about it.
Yeah, the kids teased you?
Yeah. My dad didn't know how to read, so he couldn't help. My mom, she knew, but she didn't know some of the stuff that we were bringing home. She didn't even know the history. She didn't know the kind of math that was out during our year. She didn't know none of that. But she tried the best she can, but with 7 kids, she couldn't do it all. Middle school, I fought the whole time in middle school. Because that's all I knew. You teased me. Well, the middle school I went to, that's when they started putting the blacks and the Mexicans with the whites. So I was in a white school, and they didn't want us there. So like, I get off the bus fighting. So it's like, and at least I had one teacher that would try to work with me at math, but it wouldn't sink in because my mind was somewhere else.
Did anybody test you in the schools? Did they ever test you to see if you had a learning problem?
Nope.
Nobody.
Never been tested. I never made it to high school. Yeah, I did one day.
One day?
One day. One day I made it to high school, and then I got in a fight that morning, first day of high school, got kicked out the rest of the year. So I never been to high school.
And how old were you when that happened?
15. At the time, I didn't care. I didn't care, and I was in the gangs. I was on the street anyway, and I had to fend for myself then, but I knew the gangs wasn't the right way to go. Well, I worked at a golf course from 15 to 17, and I met the chief of police that was a member at our golf course. And he cleared up my childhood record, talked to my recruiter, and I got in the Marine Corps. But in my squadron, no, I didn't know how to read. So the book that we had to study every night for all our qualification, everybody took turns reading it to me. And in 3 months, I memorized that whole book in 3 months. And when the qualifications day came, I passed. My job was tractor and trailer driver, heavy equipment operator. When I got out, I was what, 21 years old when I got out. And I found a friend of mine, which was my mom's friend, that was a truck driver. And he got me into driving trucks across country with him. I didn't get out of truck driving until my son died. That's when I got out. When he died, then I just flipped, and my license expired, and I was no good for nobody no more. Nope, no counseling, no nothing. I just got off into drugs and drinking a lot. And that's how I expressed myself.
And when you finally decided you wanted to turn your life around and you actually did want to learn how to read, you went into a library literacy program for almost 2 years. What was that like, being in that program?
It was miserable because they didn't know how to teach me. They never sat down and went to one-on-one. I had a friend took me to see Bob Filner, and we talked to Bob Filner, and he raised $2,500 for me to start, and that's how I got in. And then I did that for about 3 months until the money ran out. And then after that, wasn't no more money, so I couldn't go there no more.
And that was Congressman Bob Filner, right, from San Diego. Now, you were in the Marine Corps. Did you earn any educational benefits while you were in the Marine Corps?
Yeah.
About how much did you earn?
Well, I don't know how much they pay you to go, but it could be around $24,000. But
you had earned $24,000 because you were a Vietnam era veteran at that time. So did you go to the Veterans Administration and try to get that money to go to the reading clinic?
Oh yeah, but they always turned me down. They turned me down every time I tried. So.
Where else did you go? Did you go to the State Department?
Yep. And they turned me down too.
The State Department of Rehabilitation, and what did they tell you? Do you remember?
I don't remember what they told me, but I know they wasn't going to give me nothing. I have to scrape and scandal for my own self, or to do work here and there. Cut down trees, trim trees, landscape, handyman work, paint, whatever it is there to do, I could do it. I've been doing it like that since '94. A lot of people that are like me, they become criminals, they become in the jail system, and I guess I'm just lucky I'm not in the jail system. And, you know, that's all they know is the streets. I knew the streets too, but somehow I pulled myself out of it to do the right thing and just do good for myself. Because if you could work hard doing anything, you could always make it somehow.
Gordon was in a library literacy program for 2 years, but still was not reading. John Corcoran's book, The Teacher Who Could Not Read, supplied the answer. He was a teacher for 17 years while hiding the secret of his own illiteracy.
When I start my presentations, I say, some of you may think I am old, but in my mind, I don't think I am old. And when it comes to reading, I am bold, or so I am told. And perhaps I am bold because I know more people need to be told. And thank you for letting me tell some more people, all of you. I'm John Corcoran. Started learning to read at the age of 48 in the public library. A volunteer tutor helped me break the code, got me to about the 6th grade level. And my life was on the journey to full literacy. And I went up to San Luis Obispo and met Pat Lindemood, and a pioneer in the field of reading. And she got me to about the 12th grade level in about 125 hours, and I thought I died and went to heaven. Most adults that have difficulties learning how to read think that something's wrong with our brain, and we can't learn to read, like my fellow traveler and friend, Gordon. We're adults. We come from every place, but we have a common bond, is that we have felt the pain and the humiliation and the frustration of not being able to do something in our culture, in our society, that children can do. In a way, we're suspended, Gordon and I, in our childhood. We have some unfinished business, emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually, intellectually. And America has underestimated the power and the importance and how much damage it has done to the individuals that have passed through the system or got into adulthood without the basic skills. In America today, we're the fastest growing subculture in America. About 44% of the adults, I said 44% of the adults in America are reading below elementary level. And we can't really actualize, and we can't really be successful. Even somebody like John Corcoran. We may have street smarts, but if you don't have book smarts, and by the time you get to the 3rd grade, if you don't know how to read, write, and spell, there's no way you can succeed in school. Because in America, we have an epidemic, and we carry the shame and we carry the blame. And we bought into a big lie that we can't learn to read. And you're going to meet some people also on this tape that are going to tell you that we can learn to read. We can learn to read with proper instruction. And the key to teaching people like Gordon and I how to read, write, and spell is proper instruction. Proper instruction comes from properly trained teachers, and properly trained teachers come from universities that properly prepare them. In my childhood, I went to school just like millions of children go every year with high hopes to learn to read. For the first 6 years of my life, in my home, my mother and father, my loving mother and father, told me I was a winner. By the time I got to the 3rd grade, I ended up in the dumb row because I was not able to keep up with the class when it came to reading. I had math skills, I had social skills, I behaved myself, but I couldn't read, and I just couldn't get it. And so I found myself at 8 years old as a loser, and my mother and father told me for 6 years I was a winner, and at 8 I was a loser. And that's the way we feel if we can't read the printed page, because the printed page is the dominant language of and for success in the school place. And today in America, it's also the dominant language for success in the workplace. When you're a teenager, you're confused about a lot of things. But if you're smart and you can't succeed and your parents are saying, you know, things to you. It was athletics, but I also got tired of embarrassing my parents. They were coming to school all the time. By the time I got in the 7th grade, they were not talking about my deficiency in reading. They were talking about, you know, this kid might need some psychiatric help. I would rather be by myself than be with an outlaw. I felt like one, but I was like one person, you know, and I was trying to figure out, you know, not necessarily consciously, but subconsciously. I think that what my parents told me, that I believe that, you know, that I was a winner, and I don't know why. I don't know when I'm going to start winning here. That's why it's such an urgency. America needs to wake up and articulate the problem. And the problem in education, the basic fundamental problem in education and any hope for educational reform is breaking the cycle of illiteracy in America and the deficiencies on the part. There are some heroes. We have done a lot, and we are working on it. And there are millions of people that have tried 1,001 different ways, but we have the research now that tells us we can break this cycle. And what do we lack? Why aren't we doing it? Why have I been an advocate for 25 years now? Why hasn't America acted? It's probably because they just do not have the political will to articulate the problem, and they don't have the social will to break the code here. When I was an innocent child, I went to school with high hopes. I was hopeful, and all children that go to school are hopeful, no matter where they come from. They're hopeful and they're innocent. By the time I got to the 5th grade, I was a dropout in a sense. I didn't drop out of school, but I certainly was an outsider, and I was alienated from the dominant school place. I hated being inside the schoolroom. I felt like a failure. I was suspended. I was expelled. I sat in the 7th grade. I sat in front of the principal's office most of my 7th year in school. I spit on a teacher. I was angry. I refer to that period of my life as a native alien. Little boys, children do not have to ask adults for specific help. That wasn't my responsibility. By the time I got to be a teenager, I was just too angry. And I gave up on myself, and I gave up on the system, and I gave up on teachers. And you can see little boys in middle school right now, today, by the millions in our school systems, just like John Corcoran. So nothing has really changed. We just really haven't fessed up, and it's really a huge invisible in a way. We keep it invisible. We keep the secret, and the nation has kept the secret. We keep it secret. Personally, I never told anybody. My wife was the only person that knew I couldn't read until I was 48 years old, when I told the director of the library program, the reading program, that I couldn't read. That was the first time. It was a guarded secret. It was embarrassing. It was shame-based, so we don't wear it on our sleeves. And when we're adults, why don't we ask for help? Well, where is the help? That's number one. And then the other thing is we bought into the big lie that keeps us from asking asking for help because we think something's wrong with us. We look at the court system and the judicial system. 85% of the kids that are facing juvenile judges in the state of California have deficiencies in the basic skills. 50-60% of the people that we have locked up, incarcerated in our prisons in America have deficiencies in the basic skills. Those are clues. And you look at poverty, undereducated, uneducated, dropout rates. Dropout rates are so embarrassing and so insulting to this great nation, a nation that sends a rocket to Mars with a camera and sends pictures back, can't teach its children how to read. That is unjustified, and it's unjustified for us to perpetuate this illiteracy in this country. We have a promise in America that there is equal opportunity for everyone, and there is no equal opportunity for anyone in the schoolhouse or in the workplace that's reading at the elementary or below elementary level in today's world. That's a fact. And the good news, this is not anything controversial. This is not bilingual education. This is not sex education. This is a basic fundamental right and duty. We are a culture that does love education, and you cannot have an education without those basic skills. I'm also obligated to invite America to join me. Let's do it. We can break this cycle. When I decided in about the 8th grade that it was in my best interest to behave myself, I had some athletic skills, and I wanted to be an athlete. I wanted to be able to get on the field. Well, you can't get on the field when you get thrown out of class or you're disrespectful. And sometimes people ask me how I got through high school. Well, if you behaved yourself, you could get through high school. So I put on my best social skills and I behaved myself, and I think they called it kissing up or being a teacher's pet or whatever it was to get through high school. I cheated. People ask me where my family was. Well, in elementary school, they were meeting with the teacher, and the teacher said, oh, he's a smart boy, he'll get it. Some people just get it a little late. Well, I didn't get it. People like me don't get it without direct instruction. But about 25% of the population is like Gordon and I. You know, we have to have direct instruction. We have to have proper instruction. It's hard work for us, but the good news is that we can get it. And it's hard work to teach people like me too. This is not something that's really easy for us to do. I feel like I'm a full citizen now. I belong. My fellow travelers, my brothers and sisters, I can sit down with Gordon. We can have this same conversation about how we felt, and how we struggled, and how we wished, and how we prayed. I can remember praying in the 8th grade that, you know, I get in bed and I said, please, Lord, tomorrow when it's my turn to read, please let the words come out. And then I'd get up and turn on the light and I'd get a book and I'd try to read it and see if I got one of those zapper miracles, you know. And I didn't get that zapper miracle, but I did get a miracle worker in my volunteer tutor. Right now, today, we have a dropout rate. We've covered it up for a long time. We've hid the numbers. Do you know that if today, this year, 30% of the kids that started school, first graders that started school, 30% of them are going to drop out, and that is a huge number. If you happen to be African American, it's 50%. 50%. And if you happen to be Hispanic, 54%. Detroit, 47%. Are functionally illiterate. Functionally illiterate means they read at elementary grade level. It means they can't really read. I mean, no one, no matter how clever or smart, can maximize their fullest potential in America. And that is horrendous for an individual to be faced with, and it's also horrendous for this country. And those headlines, they come and they go. It's not sexy. It's not romantic. You can read these statistics and you'll be shocked for 24 hours, and then the public sort of lets it go away. They let it go away. They're in denial. They're embarrassed, just like I was. I was embarrassed. I didn't want anybody to know really that we're a third world country. We have more adults that can't read today than we did over the last 20 or 25 years. With all those headlines, we still haven't acted. We haven't acted. Illiteracy, they don't have any color line there, you know, and I used to think it was just guys, but it's also equal number of women that have difficulty, you know. I saw a man that was in prison, that was reading at the just learning how to read at the 3rd grade level, weep like a baby because he was reading at the 3rd grade level. He just learned how to read at the 3rd grade level. And that's why I'm saying I wish people could see how painful it is to the individuals. And how, we could get real angry at that, you know. You go look at who's causing trouble in school right now. I guarantee they're not reading at grade level. When you go to school and you're reading, it makes you smart. And when people think you're smart, you know, you really move. But when they think you're dumb, and then you think you're dumb, you start acting dumb, and then you start pushing the wrong thing. We do want to learn to read. We really do. And you know, we've felt so abnormal all our lives because we couldn't do something a 3rd grader could do, and that's read the printed page. And not only do I know how to read, but I also got to deal with the healing of all the real and imagined emotional issues that I had. When I was interviewed on Oprah asked me, what was the difference between being literate and knowing how to read and not knowing how to read? And I said, you know, I think, and I never said this, I never thought it. She asked me, that's the first time I ever said it, is that I think learning to read has filled a big hole in my soul. And I think if we teach America, children and adults, how to read, we're going to fill a big hole in America's soul also. And also, we are going to be part of the economic recovery in America if we teach people how to read, because you can't get on the information highway if you can't read. You can't use the technology. And I think we all know that's the world where we live now.
Nancy Bell, co-founder of the Lindamood Bell Reading Clinic, explains the concept of phonemic awareness, a literacy skill that is often overlooked in school programs.
So here they are, the ones that I'm going to talk to you about for reading, and that is phoneme awareness, that many of you know that are listening, some of you won't. And phoneme awareness is the ability to auditorily perceive the identity number and sequence of sounds within words. So if I say fip, fap, you should be able to tell me which sound changed. Fip, fap. The middle sound changed. If I change fap to fat, which sound changed? First, middle, or last? That's phoneme awareness.
A consequence of not teaching children to read is the growth of the juvenile and adult prison systems. One judge who is making a difference is Judge James Milliken, former presiding judge of the San Diego Juvenile Court.
We had started supervising kids who'd gotten in trouble fairly closely and making sure the ones who had drug and alcohol problems went to treatment and stayed sober. And Andrew was one of the kids that was in our program, and he had demonstrated a year of sobriety going to treatment. She says, well, if you let this kid off probation, he's going to be in prison within a year because he's a wannabe gang guy, and he's not going back to school. He's going to hang around the street corners until he commits another more serious crime with the wrong people, I might add. And so she said, we've had him tested through the counselor that he met at the Urban League, I think it was, and she introduced me to you, who had him tested, and he was reading at a second grade level, and he was dyslexic. You convinced me that if he took a 12-week specific tutoring course, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, that could be remediated. And the only problem was that it cost $9,000, as I recall. And
it was $12,000.
And so I said, well, my comments almost verbatim were, how the hell are we supposed to do that, you know? I mean, because my philosophy was, well, look, if we get these kids sober and get them in school, then, you know, the educators with a year, time on task with the kid in school should get them back close to grade level. Well, what this demonstrated was that there's a percentage of those kids who weren't going to be fixed by just going to school. They needed specific tutoring to remediate these problems. And so we sent him to this expensive remediation clinic where people who had $12,000 to help their kids who couldn't read would send their children in the summertime. And it was in Del Mar. This kid lived in southeast San Diego, so we said yes, and I ordered him to go, and I told him I'd see him in 12 months, or 12 weeks. He was doing amazingly well after 6 weeks. I remember I saw him, and I told him that if he finished the course and learned to read, he would have to write a five-page paper himself and bring it to court and read it to me. And if he could do that, I would let him off probation. And so lo and behold, it wasn't too much more than 6 more weeks, and his probation officer put the case on calendar, and Andrew came in and handed me this paper on the origins of the Civil War. Then he'd done his own research at the library at UCSD and everything, and he did his own research and wrote this paper. It wasn't quite 5 pages, but it was close, and so he read it.
I remember there wasn't a dry eye in the house.
There wasn't, and so I gave Andrew a pep talk and let him off probation, and I wasn't at all sure that this would, he was reading in terms of word attack skills at grade 16, which is, first year of graduate school. Yeah. And so, and he could read and sound out any word you'd give him. There's no chance that Andrew was headed that way. And what I learned, some of the kids who were not going to school, who were ending up in juvenile hall, and the vast majority of the kids in juvenile hall, anytime, but in those days when I was familiar with it, were non-readers, and they were not going to school because they were so embarrassed by the fact that they couldn't read. I developed a strong belief that if we would do that, not only with juveniles, but on a mandatory basis with adult prisoners when they first went to incarceration, then we would stop the growth of the prison population in our state, because people wouldn't be coming back. Over that 30-year period, we grew our prison population 1,700% in a time when the population barely doubled. And when the federal judges ordered that we needed to cut our prison population by 45,000, I mean, everybody says, oh, we're going to put all the criminals on the street. We were already releasing 70,000 a year. All we have to do is figure out a way to keep 45 of the 70,000 that we were releasing from going back. Because 85% of them go back within 3 years. 85% of them have addiction problems, and close to 80% of them have reading problems and are illiterate. So We don't do mandatory treatment in the prisons as a condition of release. If we did and made people who had those problems complete treatment, our recidivism rate would drop from 85% to something under 25%. And we would start to shrink the prison population rather than expand it, simply because we weren't sending all those people back to prison. The key to making our citizens productive is a competent public education, which is, I thought, was always the backbone of our democracy. We're not doing it. And then we incarcerate more people as a percentage of the population than any other country in the world. We fancy this place as a great democracy with great courts and great justice. You know, we incarcerate way more people than any place in the world, including Russia. I mean, this jurisdiction is not a shining star, it's Gulag West.
There are success stories of individual schools throughout the nation, but one superintendent has been able to move her total district forward by raising the reading scores of nearly all the schools in her district. Dr. Joyce Bales was the superintendent of School District 60 in Pueblo, Colorado, and it was a district in trouble. Colorado standardized tests given to fourth graders in 1997 showed that the district schools were far below the state's proficiency criteria. In response, Dr. Bales created an intensive district-wide intervention program with a research-based reading model at the center. Within just a few years, District 60 had turned around, earning praise and recognition from the state capital to Washington, D.C. Since then, Dr. Bales was recruited to the Vista, California Unified School District, where she is currently the superintendent, creating the same success.
In Vista Unified School District, we have had some great successes, and it's been through our professional development and working both with our district office staff and with our principals at the site. Principals are really the instructional leaders for the schools, so it's been really important that they understand the processes. And going into those classrooms, that is the real key, is that encouragement, that assistance, that conversation that helps every teacher learn new strategies and techniques. And basically what we look for is every child totally engaged in the process when we go into those classrooms, and is every child successful. And our teachers have some really wonderful strategies that they use. So those kind of things help the parents become a part of the process. We also have an education foundation that's focused on literacy, and through this process we've been able to provide tapes for our children to hear a new language and to learn it and provide feedback, as well as our parents. So now I have parents saying, we want to learn this technique and practice too. And actually we did have a great track record and in terms of improving reading skills. So I also contacted the folks at Linda Bell Research and their headquarters, because John had mentioned them in his message to me that he did learn to read as an adult. When I first arrived in Vista, California, I had 3 parents who came to me and talked to me about their sons who had struggled in reading. So they had read the stories about the work that we had done in Colorado, and they said, how can my child learn to read? The other thing is that some of the research programs that are available have not been well accepted in Vista, and I think people may think that it's too expensive, but it's never too expensive to do the right things for children. We get millions of dollars in our district, both from the state and the federal government, to improve education. And so I really focused a lot of our attention and our funding that couldn't be used for other things to improve language, to improve English, to improve reading. Those all go together, and I've had a lot of pushback. So that's been a challenge for us, and I can tell you this, that in order to get funding, I think the public would appreciate it if we're showing the results faster, because every time we lose a student whether it's for dropout or because they just can't master the skills, then we've lost to society. And if we look at the prison system in our state, in California, we have more people in prison than probably any other, proportionally than any other state in the United States. So, and a lot of people are there, according to the materials I read and the people that I know, that are there because they probably dropped out of school or didn't have a positive experience. Our schools rose to the top. Many of our schools got national recognition, and they were Title I schools, which are funded because of the economic needs of the children. And now one of our former principals, who was recognized as a principal by President Bush, is now the Assistant Commissioner of Education in Denver, Colorado. So a lot of great things happen along the way that we probably had some influence in, but the greatest gifts are the people who influenced us to always give something back, and literacy is it.
Gordon and Josh are now in the online tutoring program through the John Corcoran Foundation. Their journey to full literacy has begun. But according to the Nationall Institute for Literacy, only a fraction of the 32 million Americans who need this help are receiving it. In 1985, Jonathan Kozol wrote the book Illiterate America, and in his introduction he said he felt an obligation to tell what he had seen in the public schools, the level of illiteracy that he was finding. 10 years later, in 1995, John Corcoran wrote his book, The Teacher Who Couldn't Read, as a call to America about the problem of illiteracy. And here we are 16 years later, and the situation has gotten worse, not better. All of our social ills, poverty, unemployment, crime, can all be related to the problem of illiteracy. We have a social net, a safety net, but when enough people fall through that net and are hanging on the outside, looking in, not being able to participate, eventually that net will collapse for all of us. In California, we had a superintendent of instruction named Delane Easton several years ago, and she told a story about being on a plane. When she was talking to the gentleman next to her about education, he finally said, "You know, I don't have time to be concerned about other people's children." And she said the problem with that thinking is that it's someone else's child who's flying this plane. And it's someone else's child who's the air traffic controller. It's time in America that we became concerned about everyone's child and everyone's family.